Well, hi guys, it's One Love Ted, and it's time for Ted's afternoon story. I am reading from the children's classic, The Pushcart War, by Jean Merrill, and this is chapter 8. There's a lot of parentheses and quotation marks, so hopefully you can catch that, and 2 footnotes. Chapter 8, The Secret Meeting and the Declaration of War. Excerpts from the Diary of Joe Capless. The truck drivers themselves were the first to grasp the meaning of the widespread response to Wenda Gambling's remark. The day after the television program, representatives of all the trucking firms in the city held a secret meeting. The meeting was organized by the Three, as the owners of the 3 largest trucking firms in the city were called. The 3 were Mo Mammoth of Mammoth Moving, or Big Mo, as the drivers called him, Walter Sweet of Tiger Trucking, who preferred to be known as the Tiger, and Louis Livergring of Lima, Lema, Lower East Side Moving Association. The plotting of the Pushcart War and the truckers' strategy throughout was, for the most part, the work of the 3. First footnote. The 3 were originally known as the Big 3, but this caused some confusion, as the leaders of 3 important nations of the time were also called the Big 3. And after a city newspaper ran a headline announcing Big 3 carve up China over a story about Mammoth, Lima, and Tiger Trucking buying out the China Carting and Storage Company, there was some international trouble, in the course of which Moscow was bombed by an Indo-Chinese pilot. After that, the city papers referred to the 3 big trucking firms simply as the 3. The meeting was held in an underground garage owned by Mammoth Moving. It was at this meeting that a young truck driver named Joey Capless had the nerve to stand up and say, "People are right, traffic is lousy, and there are too many trucks." Joey, who worked for Tiger Trucking, was fired shortly after this meeting. Fortunately, Joey kept a diary. The diary was something he had started to pass the time when his truck was stalled in a traffic jam. It is from this diary that we have a first-hand account of what happened at the first secret meeting and in the days that followed. Here are some excerpts from Joey Capless's diary, dated the day after the secret meeting. February 15th, Columbus Avenue and 66th Street en route to 9th and 86th with 2 dozen pipe organs, 11:15 a.m. It looks like a long tie up ahead, so I may as well put down a few more facts about the meeting last night. After I have said traffic is lousy, there is a big silence. Everybody looks at me very surprised, and several guys look as if I've hurt their feelings. Then Big Mo, who is running the meeting, gets up and growls. By that I mean that he clears his throat in a particular way Big Mo has clearing his throat. It is as if you were racing your engine a little bit to test whether you have the power and the engine is warmed up. "Now maybe traffic is not so good," Big Mo says. For a minute, I think he is going to agree with me. But instead he glares at me and says, and he is nicely warmed up by now, "I say, Mr. Capless, that it is all a question of who is to blame for the traffic situation. Why pick on the poor trucks?" When Big Mo says, "Poor trucks," I laugh out loud, but nobody hears me because everybody is cheering for Big Mo. 12:15 p.m., Columbus Avenue and 69th Street. I thought I was going to make 86th Street by lunchtime, but there is still trouble up ahead, so I will continue. After Big Mo says 4 trucks, a trucker named Little Milty stands up. Little Milty says, "I agree with Big Mo. Why blame the poor trucks? If you ask me, it is all those push carts that are blocking the streets." Nobody likes this Little Milty too much, as he is known as a very mean driver. By that I mean that Little Milty would crowd out another truck as soon as he would a taxi. But for once, Little Milty gets a big hand, and about 10 different truck drivers then begin to tell how slow the push carts are, and how push carts are always sitting by the curb where a trucker wants to park, and how push carts should not be allowed to take up space in a modern city like New York. Once more, I have to laugh, and this time everyone hears me. So I explain, "Come on, how much room do a few push carts take?" Because I personally do not mind the push carts. When I am stuck in traffic like today, like almost any day for that matter, a push cart will come along and sell me a sausage roll, which passes the time. You get the best sausage rolls around Thompson Street. 69th, where I am now, is not too good for sausage roll. It looks like something is moving ahead, so I will put this away until another time. Columbus Avenue and 75th Street, 4:05 p.m. Now there is a trailer truck backed up to the curb at 76th. It is sticking halfway out into the street. The taxi driver ahead of me says that they are unloading permanent wave machines and that it will be a half-hour tie-up at least. So I may as well finish writing about the secret meeting while it is still fresh in my mind. I left off with how I was speaking up for the push carts. "Come on," I say. "How much room do a few push carts take?" I addressed my question to a driver named Matt. "You could line up 24 push carts along the curb before those carts would take up 1/2 the space of a truck like a mighty mammoth." I point to Mac. Mac drives a mighty mammoth. "Or a 10-ton tiger," I say, putting myself in the same spot. When I mention a 10-ton tiger, Big Mo looks at my boss. My boss is Mr. Walter Sweet, who is sitting right beside Big Mo, as he is one of the 3. Big Mo asks Walter Sweet, "Does this boy drive for Tiger Trucking?" A silly question, as I have as much as I said I drive a 10-ton tiger, and the boss has to admit it. That I do. I am sorry if I have embarrassed the boss, but Mr. Walter Sweet has a kind heart for the most part. "Do you have anything more to say, Mr. Capless?" Big Mo asked me. And he asked me in such a tone of voice that I know he is telling me he could be helpful in helping me to lose my job with Tiger Trucking. However, I'm not afraid of Big Mo. It occurred to me a long time ago that there are so many reasons you could lose a job that if you started to worry about them all, you would be afraid to say anything. And for anyone who has a lot to say, as I do, this would be a hardship. However, I shut up for the simple reason that I do not have anything else to say at the moment. It is such a nutty argument about the push carts. The next speaker at the meeting is Louis Livergreen. Louis owns all those leaping llamas on the Lower East Side and has pretty well cut everybody else out of business down there. Now, Louis speaks in a very smooth way. He is not a pleasant-looking man, but he speaks in a smooth voice. I have noticed that each of the 3 speaks in a different way. Big Mo speaks in a loud voice, a voice like a truck driver, my sister once said, which I felt was an insulting remark, but many people think of truck drivers in this way. The tiger, on the other hand, has a low voice, and Louis Livergreen, on the third hand, speaks, as I mentioned, in a smooth voice. Of the three, it is Louis Livergreen that I would be afraid of, and I think that it is because his voice is as smooth as a good grade of motor oil, whether he is saying something perfectly pleasant or something terrible. If somebody says something terrible in a pleasant tone of voice, I get very nervous. I would feel better if they yelled. Well, as I said, Louis Livergreen starts to talk to the truck drivers in the smooth voice. Our boys are telling us that the pushcarts are ruining the city, Louis says. And believe me, I am glad that you have been so frank about the trouble. Mr. Mammoth and Mr. Sweet and myself are not out in the trucks so much ourselves, and we have to rely on our boys to give us the facts. And now that we have got the facts, says Louis, it is very clear that what we have got to do. Louis explains that what we have got to do is to educate the public. When people complain about traffic, he says, we have to tell the people who is to blame. Otherwise, they will be blaming the trucks. From the tone of his voice and the respectful way the truck drivers are listening to him, Louis could be delivering a sermon in a church, which is not exactly the case. I know what you boys are up against, Louis goes on to say, and I operate on the east side where most of the pushcarts also operate. And I know these people. They are behind the times and a danger to the rest of us, and they have got to go. Louis gets a big hand at this point, but he is not finished. I will tell you something else, he says, and it is not something I am proud of. My own father was a pushcart peddler, and if I had not had the guts to get out and fight for myself, no matter who was in my way, I might be pushing a pushcart myself. Instead, Louis points out, I have built up the firm of Lima and put 100 leaping Limas on the streets every day of the year, rain or shine, and that I am proud of. Louis gets a big hand again. Not for me, though. While I agree that 100 trucks is something to be proud of, I do not see why a man wants to talk as Louis is talking about his father, who maybe did not have such an easy time. And rain or shine is out in the streets with a pushcart, whereas Louis, if it rains, can send out 100 drivers. Louis has a few other remarks, mainly this one. I think you boys know that the Lower East Side Moving Association has been working on a master plan for the streets of New York, a plan that will greatly improve the situation for truck drivers. I have discussed this plan with Mr. Mo Mammoth and Mr. Walter Sweet, and the plan is moving forward nicely. But before it can go into effect, we have got to solve the pushcart problem. I have not heard about this master plan of Louis Livergreen's before, but all around me drivers are nodding as if it is a fine idea. I asked several of the boys about it, and they say it is probably the usual thing to make things better for the truckers in the streets and maybe more money for the drivers. I don't know about the master plan, but it seems to me that the idea of the meeting is that the three are declaring war on the pushcarts. Well, I must sign off now, as the taxi driver ahead is signaling that they have got these permanent wave machines off the trailer. Unfortunately, I see that it is 5:30, so I will have to take the pipe organs back to the warehouse and try to get to 86th Street tomorrow. Footnote: Joey Kaplis never did get to deliver the pipe organs that he was transporting on February 15th. The following day, he was fired. And the rest of his diary is concerned with a potato farm on eastern Long Island that he acquired shortly thereafter. After footnote, really, traffic is lousy. See you tomorrow with Chapter 9, The Secret Campaign of the Pushcarts. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to my new YouTube channel, One Love Ted Koch. Thanks.